Today I will officially begin work on the roof structure of the cabin, starting with a center post. As I traveled back to the build site, I came across a patch of Dryads Saddle, otherwise known as Pheasant Back Mushrooms. It is known as Dryads Saddle because the cap of the mushroom is concave, like a saddle. It is also referred to as pheasant back because the pattern of brown scales found on the cap looks similar to those found in pheasants. Dryads Saddle like to grow on elm trees, especially if the tree is dead or dying. However, I've also seen them growing on other hardwood stumps, logs, and trees in various states of decay. As you can see here, these mushrooms are growing on an old hardwood stump. The growing season for Dryads Saddle ranges from spring all the way to early fall. Although they are the most prolific in the spring, but I can always count on seeing a few pop up shortly after a good rain, even in the middle of summer, although they don't last long in the heat. Dryads Saddle is also known by its Latin names, Polyporus squamosus, or Cereoporus squamosus. Cereoporus describes its honeycomb-like pores, which can be seen on the cap's underside and on the stem. While some mushrooms have gills underneath the cap, it's helpful to know that Dryads Saddle have pores. Squamosus refers to the brown scales that are present on the top of the cap, which is another important identifying feature. Most of the Dryads Saddle on the stump are too big or withered to harvest, but I did find a couple that were still in good shape. To remove the mushrooms, I sliced through their brackets with my knife. I harvested them this way to ensure that I didn't disturb their delicate mycelium root system. With the mycelium left intact, a new group of Dryads Saddle will likely fruit on the stump when the next rain comes. As you've probably guessed, I harvested these mushrooms because they are edible. The smaller ones are anyway. That's because as they grow bigger, they become too tough and leathery for the body to digest. I should clarify that the edible specimens still need to be cooked before eaten. Under the right set of circumstances, Dryads Saddle can grow as big as a dinner plate. But as far as eating them is concerned, the small mushrooms are what we're after. I don't bother with anything that is bigger than my hand. Anything larger will likely be too tough to eat. Later on, I'll show you an easy way to test if Dryads Saddle is good enough to eat. Now when it comes to wild food foraging, I want to caution you. Before foraging anything on your own, make sure to do the proper research for yourself. Better still, consult with an experienced forager before consuming any wild food. Just because you see some guy on YouTube saying that it's okay to eat something, don't take their word for it alone. Anyway, with that aside, Dryads Saddle has a unique smell. To me, they can sometimes smell like watermelon rind. Other times, they smell like fresh cucumbers. However, they still have a general mushroom taste. After I boiled some stir-fry noodles with a pinch of salt and some soy sauce, it was time to fry the mushrooms I had just gathered. First of all, another good way to tell if Dryads Saddle is good to eat is by pressing its pores with your fingers. If they feel mushy and fall apart easily, the mushroom is past due. But if the pores feel firm and springy, then it's still good to eat. Finally, the best way to tell if Dryads Saddle is tender enough to eat is by doing the knife test. After washing the mushrooms, I removed the outer margin of the cap, since it would have been too thin to fry anyway. If a knife can easily slice through the cap, then it is just right for eating. As I moved closer to the stem on the inner part of the cap, you will notice that my knife began to catch a little more. That's because the mushroom naturally becomes tougher toward the stem, which is why most people discard the stem when preparing the mushroom for cooking. However, my knife sliced through the entire cap without much resistance, so I kept even the stem on this occasion. I fried the mushrooms in some butter before adding the noodles in, followed by a splash of sesame oil and another dash of soy sauce and salt. I'm telling you, on a cool wet day in the bush, this hits the spot. The Dryads Saddle mushrooms are meatier than most other kinds, but that's why I like them so much. Otherwise, they taste like a typical mushroom. With some warm food in my belly, it was time to get some actual work done. After plenty of measuring, double-checking, cutting, and lugging, I'm happy to say that the 17-foot tall center post is in. I'm even happier knowing that I won't be moving it again. I'll be showing more of my work in a later episode, but for now, the day's work is done, and it was time for me to settle in for the night. My plan of action was to make a temporary room under the loft that I could comfortably sleep in. Since this is early autumn, the nights have already become chilly, which is why I decided to install my camping wood stove in the room as well. Two crates of firewood was enough to keep me warm throughout the night, and to cook my breakfast in the morning. Autumn always seems to arrive sooner than expected. These early fall colors, these beautiful harbingers of winter, are a gentle but sober reminder that we must have the roof covered before the snow arrives. It may not look like much, but it was warm and cozy. Tonight will mark my first night in the cabin. I can't wait to see how much better this place will look once we've installed the windows, chinked the logs, and put a proper roof on. But for now, this is just perfect. I'd like to thank Thrunite for sponsoring this episode. On a personal note, I've been using Thrunite flashlights exclusively for the past several years, because they are far more powerful than anything that can be found in a typical box store. For example, the biggest and brightest flashlights that I've found in any store usually max out at 700 to 900 lumens, which pales in comparison to the flashlight I'm using today, the Thrunite TC15. It's a fraction of the size and yet has a staggering output of 2300 lumens. The TC15 is capable of such an output because it is made with a high-quality Cree LED, rated for 20 years of use, and has a high-output lithium-ion battery, which is rechargeable. I can attest to the durability of Thrunite flashlights, as I've used them underwater, slammed them around, and even froze one in a bucket of water once. Yet every single one of my Thrunite flashlights still work perfectly to this day. I believe in the quality of Thrunite products so much that I recently partnered with them to make a limited edition outsider flashlight. Here's what it looks like. Instead of the standard black, it comes in coyote tan, which is a nod to all the coyotes that I run with in this area. The outsider crest has also been etched into the aluminum body. Thrunite has only made a limited run of these special edition TC15s, so if you want to snag one before they're gone, I'll make sure to include a link in the description. The good news is that although this is a limited edition light, it's being offered at the same price as a regular TC15. What's more, a portion of every sale goes towards supporting what we do here on this channel. Not only did I use a Thrunite flashlight to light my way through the forest in this episode, but I also used it to light the inside of my makeshift room. Well, hello everyone. It's the end of the day and I'm tired, but it's nice that I have this little room set up. I've got the wood stove going and it's keeping this place really warm. Although it's not an extremely cold evening outside, it's cold enough though, so it's nice to have this stove to take the edge off the heat, and as well it provides a way for me to cook some food while I'm out here. Well, this is officially my very first night spent here at the cabin, and although the roof isn't on yet, I'm just excited to be out here. For the time being, I'm using the loft floor as my temporary roof. Since I don't have chinking in the logs yet to hold in the heat, I've well, first of all, I've got some welding blankets here, which are closest to the stove, so I have the welding blankets so that they can resist the heat. Although the metal shielding I put up here is doing a good job at keeping anything from getting too hot. And I've actually put the stove on some 3-inch blocks and then have the sheet metal underneath. So there's that buffer zone to keep the plywood from getting too hot. But honestly, I can even touch the sheet metal here with my hand, and although it is quite warm, it's not all that hot, so it's doing a good job. So yeah, I have the welding blankets behind me. I've got a couple wool blankets here on the side wall, and then I've got a tarp over here in this corner. And it's doing a really good job at keeping in the heat tonight. As a matter of fact, I think I might actually let this die down before I go to sleep, because I think I'm going to be too hot to sleep. But it's nice to have this as an option anyway. I might even keep this stove here for now, so as we head into the cooler weather and as we continue to work on the cabin roof, we can come under here whenever we need to, light a fire in the stove and keep warm. I've seen a lot of people asking in the comments over the past few months about my grandfather's woodshed. And in the springtime, I did an episode talking about how in the past my grandfather has had problems with people, whether it's one person or several people, stealing his firewood from his shed. The thing is, my grandfather, he's in his 90s. It takes a lot of work for him to gather his own firewood. And of course we try to help him as well, but he does it himself quite a bit because he loves to, but it's a lot of work for him. And he heats his home with that firewood, and he also makes some money off of it. And so to have someone steal his firewood is the equivalent to stealing the heat out of his home. It's the equivalent to stealing money out of his pocket, which is hard enough to have happen when you're young. But to do that to a 90-year-old man who has put so much blood, sweat, and tears into getting that firewood in the first place, it just really hurts. And so, of course, when we learned that someone had stolen a lot of my grandfather's firewood, we were quite upset. So what my dad and I did is we installed a security system in the woodshed that would alert us if someone was entering it without authorization. And it would also hopefully scare them away because it had a very loud siren. And so we did that in hopes that it would deter anyone else from coming in and taking wood. I'm happy to say that there hasn't been any activity at all. And that's because the security system was only one part of the plan. My grandfather and we as a family have done several things to make sure that there won't be anyone else coming in and stealing wood. And so the security system was the first phase, and then we got trail cams, we put up signs, we took the tractor and dragged heavy boulders onto the main trails where people might get access if they knew where to go in. And then my grandfather installed a heavy metal gate at the main entrance. With all these measures in place, I'm pleased to say that we haven't had any more problems. The day was finished, and so was I. After loading the stove up, I turned in for the night. 5 minutes from now, I will learn that I forgot the maple syrup, which is a pretty big oversight on my part, as far as pancake breakfasts are concerned anyway. In lieu of maple syrup, a sliced nectarine would have to do. Here's to many more warm and cozy nights spent here at the cabin. To having an actual roof over my head in the very near future. To family, who will one day dine within these walls. To my dad, for helping raise them. And here's to maple syrup. May it never be forgotten, ever again. Anyway, that's it for today. Until next time, my friends.